It's a Stanley Cup edition of 100% Hockey. John Shannon here. Darren Millard's traveling back from Raleigh to Las Vegas, Nevada for games 3 and 4. Obviously, Saturday is game 3. To compensate for Millard's absence, we decided to go to the bullpen and brought in 2 Stanley Cup champions. Scotty Bowman needs no introduction that way. Obviously, the coach of both Montreal and Detroit and Pittsburgh, the only man to win the Stanley Cup with 3 different teams. And Ken Hitchcock, who coached back-to-back Stanley Cup championship series in 1999 and 2000 with the Dallas Stars, winning against Buffalo, losing against the New Jersey Devils. Both of them will have thoughts on what they watched in the first 2 games, what adjustments need to be made, and we'll probably talk a little bit about their experiences of coaching against each other. On this edition of 100% Hockey, John Shannon, Scotty Bowman, Ken Hitchcock. At least a few of us have our names on the Stanley Cup. This is 100% Hockey.
NHL TV is now on DAZN. Hockey lives here.
Here we go.
Watch every game from every team. The best players in the world. And the coldest plays on ice. Watch up to 4 games at once for the ultimate NHL experience. Sign up now at DAZN.
Welcome back to 100% Hockey. John Shannon. Millard's in the air as we tape the show between Raleigh and Las Vegas. That chuckle is of Stanley Cup champion Scotty Bowman, also joined by Stanley Cup champion Ken Hitchcock. I figured, boys, if I was going to do this show by myself, I'd bring the big guns in and let you guys talk rather than having to listen to Millard anymore. So, Scotty, your impressions of what we've seen in the first 2 games of the Stanley Cup Final. Pretty good stuff, huh?
Well, yeah, I expected the way that they play these teams. I mean, they were big on, they don't get a lot of chances against, and they don't. I mean, they usually don't get a lot of chances for, but they get enough. I was confused last night, though. I don't. They didn't mention this, but maybe you could figure what happened. But on that review that Tortorella did to see exactly what happened, I was going to ask you, I think there was confusion on the referee because, you can't score a goal if the puck is in the glove or underneath the pad, and you push that puck in with that mannerism. It's not a goal. You can't score a goal by pushing the pad and everything in. But the referee, when he announced when he was talking about why the goal wasn't scored, he said it was goalie interference. Mm-hmm. But it's a different kind of interference because I wish that he would have said that it wasn't interference. Was it interference by a player, or was it the shooter that was interfering because he was pushing the glove or the pad? I was confused on that.
According to the official release from the NHL last night, video review confirmed the call on the ice that Ivan Barbashev interfered with Frederik Andersen. So it wasn't Jordan Staal who poked the puck underneath. It was Barbashev who was at that near post that was the real issue. So Hitch, tell me, would you in that situation would you have challenged?
Yeah, it's always dangerous on that 50-50, like that. That could have gone either way. It's too dangerous for me to make that call unless you're closer to 75%. I thought, the call could go either way. And then I think Torts made the call, too, because he trusts his penalty killing so much. And I didn't think I think he thought he could kill the penalty anyways if it didn't work out. But that's the first time where Carolina really stepped up on the power play and got a goal. But that was more 50-50 than it was 75-25 for Vegas.
You concur, Scotty?
Well, yeah, I think that whoever that made the call, obviously they had maybe different with a picture that I had at home. I couldn't tell. It was just a collection of players. I couldn't even see what happened to Barbashev or Stahl. So I mean, it's a tough. Yeah, I think you're right. Ken's right on it. Unless it's so flagrant, it's a hang of a chance you take. But fortunately, they did tie the game up. I think it would
Mm-hmm.
have had more of a situation if that would have been, the difference in the game. But at least they did tie it up and they went into overtime. But yeah, that rule is so it's so divisive. I don't know. They have to do something about that. I don't know what they can do.
You know, it's funny. We there are so many things that we have tried in the game to make cut and dry, right or wrong. But in game one, there was one of those discretionary icing calls
Yeah.
that Vegas got caught on. And then there was this discretionary call. So there's still the human element that decides
Right.
so much of what the game is all about. And in both situations, they both went against the Golden Knights.
Yeah,
So,
and yeah. The rules are they want to try to get it right. You're right. They want to. They do. They're taking every effort to make sure, like they have the four officials, the two referees and two linesmen, and they still often don't see enough that they can make the right call. But that's part of the game.
yeah.
Uh,
Ken, you have been in a Stanley Cup final and you've had disagreements with referees during games, and then you have the off day and you deal with the supervisors. What kind of discussions go on? Or as a coach, do you get involved in that, or do you leave that to in your situation? Did you leave that to Bob Gainey?
Yeah, I left it to Bob. I never got involved. The only time I got involved, I kicked the referee's door, and it cost me a lot of money. So I stayed out of it. And Bob would discuss it, but Bob was really articulate in what he wanted to see change and what he thought was fair or unfair or anything like that. But it's so emotional for us as coaches. Like you look at both guys on the bench right now, and it almost looks like both guys are ready to explode because the games are so intense and so emotional. And a coach getting involved with a referee at any time, even on the off days, is not the right thing to do.
What about you, Scotty?
well, Tortorella they had a mic on him last night. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want a mic on the bench, but I guess they can put whatever they want. I mean, you could put, I guess they could put mics near the bench and they could probably hear what you're talking about. But there's no, it's the same thing as the people that are in between it's different in Raleigh, but in a lot of rinks, the guy that's the color man, he's sitting right there. He's got a better view than anybody. He can find out exactly everything that goes on. I just felt that the players' benches were sanctuary. That was our privacy. I didn't want too much to go on. And I mean, I know I was just at the end of my line when they were allowing us to be interviewed. And of course, they used to do it when I started. They were interviewing. They didn't wait for the timeout, and it wasn't that easy to think about what's you're coaching the team. You don't have as much time as people think.
I think, John, one of the things I agree with Scott 100%. The benches for the coach and players, the locker rooms for the players, and I think there's a lot of information that gets spilled out there now that is dangerous to coaches, and it's hard on coaches because you can't believe. Like I found the bench. I've sat on the sidelines of a lot of sports with football, baseball, basketball, and the hockey bench is the most emotional place in the game, and you got to have some protection for the coach because there's things that get blurted out there, and you can say the wrong thing at the wrong time and be stuck with that comment for the rest of your life.
So that third period we saw in game two, Stankoven goal, Jankowski goal, Gostisbehere. How do you manage that emotion, say, on the Golden Knights bench, where they were in full control at 2-0, Ken? They were in full control. You guys probably loved those first two periods as coaches. The way the defense, I mean, the way they collapsed, you probably loved it. It wasn't great viewing, but you probably enjoyed it. So how do you manage after the Stankoven goal to get people refocused?
Usually you have a line that can really generate pressure on the opposition, and you send it down and it settles your game down. So, both teams have great fourth lines, and you can score a goal and then the next two shifts are in your own zone. That takes the energy away from the team that scored the goal. So I think both coaches have done a heck of a job in using their full bench, but that's when you really need your checkers to put the puck back in the offensive zone and create pressure and take the pressure off of you because you just got scored on. And I think both teams got their four lines deep legit, not just talking about it, they're legit. And I think they're becoming real factors in the series.
Scotty, how do you coach when it's so loud?
Pretty tough. You got to be ready, and you got to be on your toes. That you can't wait. You got to just have everybody ready. I mean, I use a lot of times I use the touch system, and because sometimes you have the same first name or the second name. So I used to tell our players that if you feel that I'm touching you, that's what you have to do in a busy rink. That's too loud. You can't get because it's these rinks are all the same now. But I think there's some that get a little noisier than others, and that when that team get going, when that Carolina team gets going, boy, they don't stop. And look at Montreal was the same thing that series. I mean, Montreal was singing during the game and everything else. So you got to really have a pretty good handle on how you're going to. I always worried about making sure that the players knew before the puck just gets going again, that they knew who's next. You got to when we started, Ken and I, we didn't have people to help us like they help now. So I'm sure now that, especially, I don't know about, I guess Gleason is probably doing the defense for Carolina to Tim Gleason, but Stevens is doing a lot of the defense work. And you count on it. Now I think the coaches are counting on their other people a lot more than we did when we started. It's changed.
I agree with that. We're using the assistant coaches to help us change the lines too. We're calling it out, and then they're tapping. They're making sure that the next line's ready to go. And I think changing at this time of year and how well you change and how fast you can get off the ice is really important. I always remember. I listened to Al Arbor say once, the only time I want you rested is when your seat's on the butt on the bench, because at this time of year, changing is really important, and getting your people on the ice fast is really important. And I think you got to really use your assistant coaches, because the noise itself is tough, but then the pumped in noise even makes it worse. And you got to really be ready, because you can get caught with too many men on the ice because the players can't really hear you all the time.
So in these two games, with everything that's going on, how much is strategy and how much, Ken, is managing emotions?
I think Vegas has done a great job in changing what needed to change to play against Carolina. I think Vegas made some changes in their game. It's really interesting, Shanny, because Carolina lives off the blue line turnovers. Their counterattack game is second to none. Vegas didn't do a good job in the first period and a half of game one, but they changed. And they've now got the puck deep, and they're playing below the goal line, and it's really become effective. They're also stretching their wide side winger early and often, really wide and really at the far blue line, so they're opening up spaces for people to come underneath. Whereas Carolina, they just present the game, and if they get you closed down in the defensive zone quickly, they can counter on you. But if they don't, then they get occupied like they did last night. So I think both teams have made great adjustments. But I'm more impressed, quite frankly, with the adjustments that Vegas made because they were outplayed pretty badly in the first half of game one.
Scotty, during a game, what kind of process do you go through as the coach to say, you know what, I got to stick with the game plan or I have to make change? When do you know that? And how do you know that when the ebb and flow of the game is, you know, you got to be, you know, you're, even if you're down 2-0, you still are doing some things right?
Well, I think when we had good teams, there was always, like Ken had mentioned earlier, a line that you could count on. I mean, you had superstars on your lineup that were going to be there no matter what happened, but you had the grinders were so important because they dictated the work ethic. We used to start them every period. I noticed with Carolina and the Montreal series, every time they had a timeout, and there's 3 or 4 of them. We don't know when they're coming now. The first one's at 13 and 8, and then 2 more. But every time they had a timeout, Brindamore would come with his 4th line. That line of Jankowski and those guys. He would come with that line, and he didn't care about the matchup. He just wanted to make sure the pace coming after a timeout, I'm not going to get caught. And we always had a line, I'm sure Ken is the same way, we always had a line of workers that they weren't as talented as the other 2 lines or 3 lines, but boy, they could set the table. And I used to like those kind of players. Even with having so many Hall of Fame players on teams, they were important naturally to carry your team. But those workers, they set the pace, and I think it wears off. And one thing I did notice in these games now, and we don't see it as much even in the early going, but boy, when they change on the fly, I was watching both teams. The players don't coast to the bench, and they sprint to the bench now, which is something that I always stressed. In fact, this fall I was at a development game in Buffalo, and I first time I ever met the coach, nice guy too, and I think he was in the top 2 or 3 in the voting. Dan Muse from. Yep. He was in Nashville. He was in Rangers, and was sat with him and watched a period of one of the games, and he was picking my brains, and he said, you know, what can you tell me are real important? I said, well, everything's important, but I said, you know, Dan, I would say 2 things to you. If you can get your players to sprint continuously, you keep after them. Even when they make poor changes now, they don't change like what they did when Ken and I started. We were very adamant about when you should come off the ice, but now they come off at different times. It's a different game. They're taking 30, 40-second shifts. Our players were taking over a minute and a quarter. So now I said, if you can get your players to give you that first, if no matter where they are coming to the bench, don't tell me they're that tired they can't give you 4 or 5 strides. Okay, they have to slow up when they get near the bench because sometimes they have to jump over. But I said that would be a big factor, and I used to practice that all the time when we used to have controlled scrimmages, or we'd have line rushes and then replacing them with another line. And I emphasized that you can't tell me that you can't get to that bench a little quicker. And if you do it over 80 games, or it'll now be 84 next year, you're gonna get an edge from some teams that don't care about it. And the other one I mentioned to Dan was, because I learned when I first started coaching, I used to go and watch the Canadians practice, and Toe Blake would be out there, and when they had line rushes over the blue line, or they had scrimmages, they didn't have a lot of scrimmages, but 15 or 20 minutes every game, every practice, rather, and if it was a real close play at the blue line, and it was sort of maybe a tie, Toe would blow the whistle. And I asked them, and the players would just revolt on the ice. I was onside. he said, why did you make it close? Because in those days they didn't have the review. And he said, why do you make it close? Why don't you just make sure you don't go offside? And I said to Dan Muse, I said, I would really work. I don't want to see my team score goals this year and have them called back. Because I said, I always stress with the players, the guy that controls the blue line is the player that has the puck. And he better make sure he's not doing that extra little move back because the other guy is thinking, well, he's going over the line. But if you don't have the puck, don't tell me that you shouldn't go offside. If you don't have the puck, you're going to get fast enough. You're trying to make it a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-2, but you got a lot of ice. You got 60 feet to get to the net. And I said those are two things. If you don't score, if your team scores a goal this year and it's never called back, that'd be a great accomplishment. And I don't know what they did this year in Pittsburgh, but he did a good job. And I know that young coaches, there's a lot of things you could tell them, but those two items were always pushed on my back from good coaches. I got to know Toe Blake. I got to know Punch Imlach. His team's always trained in Peterborough. I admired the way that that he ran that team, and I got to know him. And as a young coach, if you can get some tips from a veteran coach, it's a good help.
We had this.
By the way,
we had the same thing. We would practice change drill twice a week, and it drove the players nuts. But we were the one. There was a period of time in St. Louis where we were the best change team in the league, and we did it as a warm-up drill, and it got very competitive. We played the game till 10, and you had to get the puck deep, and you had to get off the ice and win the race. And we would do it at least twice a week. And I think coming to the bench can be a big advantage. If you're coming on the ice hard and you're going off the ice hard, you got a big advantage because you're out changing people. You're getting fresh people on the ice when the other guys are tired, and you win the change game. You win the game a lot of times. It's like it's the same thing like Scotty was talking about the blue line game, about not going offside. If you kept a stat where both blue lines were critical, and if you won the blue line game, you won the game, and if you won the blue line game a lot, you won the series. And so what you did with the puck on both lines was critical, and then how you got off the ice was even more critical.
By the way, based on that second goal by Carolina, the Jankowski goal, Carrier did a heck of a job.
He did.
Staying on side, right?
Yeah, he done right. Yeah, because they talked. They were looking at it, and it was very simple. After you looked at the replay, he made a great play. He made sure that puck was going over the line, and then he went after it. I give him a lot of credit. But that's where those kind of players are so important to a team because they never had a chance to play up on lines with some teams they were with before, but. Brindamore's and Tortorella's the same way. You got different lines that are dangerous, and who would have thought with down a goal, 7 or 8 minutes left in the game, and you get out there, and sometimes we used to say, well, we got to play our best guys, but boy, I give him a lot of credit. He's got a lot of, the Jankowski scores his first goal in a long time, but he's getting goals at the right time, and I think the same thing with Tortorella. Like that's one of the strengths of that team is I don't care who you're going to shadow. Like everybody talks about the Eichel line, and then you got Marner on another line, and look what Howden's doing. But then you got these other guys that at the right time can score goals. It's a well-balanced team, and I think that's why this series is got a lot of attention because both teams are, and you could even hear Tortorella. They used it about 3 times or 4 times, but he wants that puck up the ice. He doesn't want it across, and it reminds me, John and Ken, when Henri Richard started to play real top hockey as a young player with that five cups in a row. I remember one time they asked Henri, they said, what system are you guys using to get the puck out of your own end? He said, well, I got to think for a minute. He said, well, we basically get the puck out of our own end as fast as we can. And that's about 60 years ago. And it's the same thing as they're preaching now. Get the puck north. Don't get it east and west. And, Tortorella was on the bench last night, and they had the mic, and I think he said, get it up. Don't not across,
I think that's what's made this fascinating is both play at a high pace.
Oh, boy.
Neither team's trying to slow the game down. So it just goes at breakneck speed. And when you have games like this that are done at breakneck speed, sometimes you get mistakes. But I like the fact that they both advance it really quickly and they get after you right away. There's no slow the game down and try to control it. They're just attacking all the time. And I think that makes for great television and great hockey.
The Braden McNabb injury, what kind of effect did that have on the game, do you think, Ken?
Huge. That's a great pair. That's an unbelievable pair. They dominate the game 5-on-5. They're the perfect mix for the two guys, and that's a big hole. Probably if he can't go, probably Hutton comes in, I would say, John.
Hutton or Korzak?
Yeah.
That's a big loss.
That's a big loss, boy. He's a really important player, McNabb.
Well, I tell you what, we will take a quick break. We have 2 Stanley Cup champions on the show today. No Millard, which is a blessing, so we can get more champions on here. Scotty Bowman, Ken Hitchcock, on this edition of 100% Hockey. Back after this.
With the NHL app, you can listen to every NHL game right from your phone. And with home and away broadcast feeds, you choose your way to listen.
And he scores!
Whether you're at work, at the gym, or stuck in traffic, the NHL app puts you right in the action all season long. Every team, every game, everywhere you go. Download the NHL app and never miss a moment.
Welcome back to 100% Hockey. John Shannon, Ken Hitchcock, Scotty Bowman. Don't forget, if you enjoy the podcast, hit the like button, subscribe on YouTube, on all the podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music. It's a fun day today, being able to talk to 2 legends of the game, 2 members of the Hockey Hall of Fame, about what we are watching in a series that has a possibility, guys, of being an all-time classic based on the first 2 games. Ken, you talked about this as being a series in games of adjustment. Going to Vegas, who has the biggest challenge to make the biggest adjustment between the 2 coaches?
I would say right now for me, it's Carolina. They're being kept on the outside right now, and they've got to find a way to get to the inside. Vegas lets you in the zone and then squeezes you hard, and they're keeping a lot of plays on the outside. They're not letting anything happen in the middle. So I think Carolina's got to find a way, especially with their top players, to get more to the inside. And I think Vegas, sometimes when you get at home, you want to make the extra play. And I think Vegas, if they keep it simple on the blue line like they did yesterday, I think they can really advance the puck below the goal line. And if they play the game below the goal line and they hang on to pucks and play keep away, they can wear out that man-to-man. But I think Carolina's they got to find a way to get more to the inside, because right now they're being kept to the outside for the most part.
Scotty, this is still a game of matchups. Are we seeing one team being more effective in matchups than the other?
I don't think they worry as much about it. Like we mentioned earlier, when you have 4 lines and you're going to play them, and they know when they put those players out there, there's certain players you're going to be more careful with. There's not much time and space. Ken mentioned earlier, just the conversation before, that there's no room to get to like the Aho and those kind of players. and then and Eichel and his guys, they like to hold on to the puck and look around and make plays into the middle. But boy, if you cover that center part, you're making shots from the side. They're not easy. I mean, naturally, there's a lot of traffic in front of the net. I think the thing that that Carolina can take on their behalf is they've had a hang of a road record, and they've got behind in one series against Montreal. And you know, it's an amazing feat when you think. I don't understand how it's they're up to six now, six overtime games this year that they 6 out of 6, two at the end of last year, 8 straight games that they haven't lost a game in overtime, and of course that's amazing record, you know. And you know, I thought the way that the game was going, I said, boy, that goal that they tied the game late in the third for Vegas, but I was amazed how the game changed in the first 3 or 4 minutes. You know, they came out, Carolina, and it was a totally different game in overtime. They pressed down that was their game, and they forced the penalty. That happened in neutral zone. Hurdle took that penalty, but you know, they just looked a different team in the overtime, and I was wondering how they were going to react, especially after giving up a goal with, you know, hardly 65 seconds or something left. I couldn't believe it, but they went in the dressing room, and boom, they came back out, and I think they just said, "Look, we're going to take this game in our own hands." I give them a lot of credit. Their power play. The guy made 2 good plays. I mean, Gostisbehere has been a player that's bounced around a little bit with Arizona and Philadelphia and that, but boy, he made some play. When you think about it, he took that puck and he looked at the goalie and he threw it across to Jarvis. That was what a quarterback should do, and even Rod Brindamore mentioned that afterwards. I saw part of his talk, and he said that, yeah, that's why he's the quarterback on the power play, and we weren't making those kind of plays. And that's how they scored the goal, and he took the shot when Stahl tipped it in. And, you know, it's never a bad thing to take a good shot at the net, but I thought it was a terrific play. I was surprised that Jarvis, he was about 30 feet out. It wasn't like he's closer to the dot. He was out near the top of the circle, and of course, you know, he's a good young player, and he's been struggling a little bit. He got a lot on that puck, and it just got through where his arm, between his arm and his side.
Yeah. But the thing with Gostisbehere is that because, I mean, let's face it, is he the greatest defensive defenseman? No, but he's so effective in that position. Carter Hart has to respect his shot in that scenario, correct?
Yeah, he scored goals in the series, even the previous series. Yeah, he's a specialty player, but they've taken the specialty that he can do, and he has good hockey sense, and now he has confidence for sure, and that's one part of their game that they have to improve on. And you know, they did get 2 goals on the power play, which was a big thing in a playoff game.
And Ken, that was going to be my next question, is take me inside John Tortorella's penalty killing meeting today or tomorrow. Do you have to make adjustments? You've been so good on the penalty kill, but obviously what Gostisbehere's doing now for the last 2 power plays has become a bit of a challenge for the Golden Knights penalty killers.
Well, I think they left Stahl on the ice for the first one, which was smart because that was just get it to the net. But I think what would bother Torts more than anything is that they didn't get the first goal blocked. Mm-hmm. Not very often against Vegas, the way they're playing and killing penalties, you get a shot through. But they got that shot through that Stahl tipped. And then I think one of the adjustments that Carolina's made is they're getting the puck back to the top and off the half wall. So now it's coming downhill. And when a power play is coming downhill, that's a hard thing to defend against. You look at both pucks, one was a direct shot downhill and one was an angle shot to one of the flankers downhill. So they're not trying the cross ice passes. They're not making the extra play.
No.
As soon as they can, they're getting it to the net and they're bringing it to the net. So it's going to make their power play very dangerous. And I think it's the same adjustments that Vegas needs to make. Vegas needs to bring the puck from the top down and operate that way, because that's the only thing that are going to open up the PK a little bit, because both teams are so aggressive killing penalties and they both got a beat on each other. I think more than anything, you got to be playing this game downhill, especially 5-on-4.
All right, a little off topic. You guys coached against each other over the years. Scotty, what was it like to coach against Ken Hitchcock?
Well, Ken always had his lines pretty well organized. And I mean, I know when they won the cup and they had the strength down the middle, that was a big thing for Dallas. I mean, he had when he had Modano and Neuendijk, they made some big moves there, and they were a dangerous team. And I was thinking of his players that he had, and I saw one on the ice the other day at the World Championships. Ken could tell you how good a player this guy was, Jari Lehtinen. I was thinking about Finland, like winning the World Championships, and how good a player Jari Kurri was, and he was a great two-way player. And Jari Lehtinen was Modano was a superstar, but boy, I Ken will tell you. I think I'd like to find out about it. But Ken, how much did Lehtinen mean to Modano as a player?
Scotty, he meant everything. And what I mean by that is that Jari, whenever somebody was having a struggle, whether it was Mo or whether it was Joe or whatever, I just put Jari on the line and he would.
Wow!
Within the game, he'd get straightened out. Like he's the only player I think I've in all my years in the NHL that I never really coached. I don't think I instructed him once. He just went out and practiced and played, and he was a perfectionist. And we had a team of perfectionists in that 4 or 5 year window there. But playing against Scotty was really hard, Shanny. And Scotty is the best change coach I've ever seen in my life. They won a series against us by out-changing us, taught me a lot of lessons. And I think when you coach against Scotty Bowman, you better be prepared, because they're going to beat you in every facet if you're not. And their team played fast, and they played with precision, and it was hard to play against. And it was really interesting because we couldn't beat Detroit. Detroit struggled against Colorado.
Colorado, yeah.
And we could beat Colorado. So there was this 3-team mix, and whoever, if we, the 1 year we lost in the conference finals, we got Detroit. And then twice in a row, we came out and got Colorado in the conference finals and beat them. So it was an unbelievable 3-team loop that each team had their adversary that they couldn't beat.
Scotty, you talked about your third and fourth liners that you trusted. You had the grind line in Detroit. Maltby, Draper, and Kosher. So I mean, those three guys were something. Did you have a similar line in Montreal when you were coaching there?
Yeah, when we changed our team, we were getting a lot of young players when I got there, and of course we had all those draft picks. But what changed the team is we got beat the second year I was there. We won the second year, lost the third, and then all of a sudden we had a really good farm team. Al McNeil was a terrific coach in Halifax, and we brought up Doug Risebrough and Mario Tremblay, and they were young players, and they were tough. And they had an offensive flair, but they were more defense than offense. And that changed our team around. The work ethic that those guys had, I would start them every period in games, not against good teams as much as against teams that you should beat, but you better make sure you work. I always started them in games because I wanted to start a good work ethic. And with Lambert on left wing and Riseborough at center and Tremblay, they were young and they were hungry. They played probably 12 minutes a game because we had another 2-3 lines that played. But boy, they gave you everything they could. They could kill penalties. They never got power play time. And they meant a lot to the team because we had our 2 scoring lines, and then we had Doug Jarvis and Bob Gainey, and we had Jim Roberts or Regent Houle as the right wingers, and Jarvis and Gainey were they were involved with Ken as well, but they were the ultimate defensive players that could play against top players. They could rifle in enough goals to get important goals. Their penalty killing, Doug was such a face-off guy. I mean, it was amazing. I remember when Montreal drafted him, he got drafted in the WHA, and one of the guys that was instrumental was Roger Nielsen, because he was doing a little scouting for us when he was in Peterborough, and he had Doug Jarvis and Bob Gainey, I guess, and he said Doug Jarvis is the best face-off player in hockey. And I called him and said, well, you mean like in junior? No. I said, well, you got some pretty good ones in the NHL. You got Bobby Clark and you got guys like that. He said, face-offs. He said he's got the best. And, it was amazing with Doug Jarvis on face-offs, because I used to bring him when we played Buffalo in the playoffs one year. I brought him to watch Buffalo. We flew together to watch Buffalo in a playoff game. I wanted to see what their faceoffs were doing, and he said, "Well," and I said, "Doug, what did you find out?" He said, "Well, I always want to be down first." He was amazing. He must have had terrific reflexes, because his stick was on the ice. Right on the dot, and he had all kinds of tricks. He and Bob Gainey, like when killing a penalty, instead of taking the puck to the boards, they would take it to the middle of the rink, and Bob would be standing there getting the puck and shooting it down the ice. But those 2 guys, we had 2 checking lines. And we had enough scoring up front. We had Mahovliches and Lafleur and Schutt and these kind of guys. But the 2 checking lines, Riseborough line and the Jarvis line, we had a great team. No reason that team shouldn't be considered one of the top, because there's nothing that we couldn't do to win a game.
A former Montreal Canadian guy on your team, D. Carbonneau, Hitch, right? He was the leader of one of those groups for you, right?
Yeah. What changed for us, Shannon, were 2 moves that Bob made. Number one was when we got Sergei Zubov. It changed.
Oh, wow.
Our patience game was unbelievable. And then the trade that Bob made that didn't seem big at the time, that ended up being really big, was when we got Brian Scrudlin and Mike Keane. And when those 2 guys came into our group, they solidified a line and allowed me to play Carbonneau more minutes as the 3rd center. And they held the group to a really high level standard, an accountability standpoint. And those 2 guys became the vocal leaders of the hockey club. And then Zubov kind of calmed everything down. He brought patience to his game, brought patience to our game.
Boys, before we let you go, just thoughts on games 3 and 4. Scotty, what do you think? It's hard to predict because these 2 teams have been so intense and so complete. What would your expectations be of the games in Vegas?
I would think Carolina got to make sure. So far, Freddie Anderson is now into his 4th series. This is quite a stretch for him. He hasn't been overworked. I think he'll have a little bit. I think that always the home team should be able to muster up some more offense. That would be the question mark for me. Is both of these goalies are sort of unknown. They're not goalies that have had a long run. Anderson's had some run, more than, of course, the Carter Hart's just a rookie, but as in the playoffs. But I think it comes down that the goaltending is going to be a big factor, and Freddie Anderson to me is got to really prove that he's ready to really take the bull by the horn, because I think he's going to get more work in Vegas. And you never know. Penalties are always a factor. I don't think you can win games in the finals on power plays, because you're not going to get very many. The referees, as series goes on, the players are more attentive. These guys are both of these teams. It's so hard to distinguish a good hit and a foul hit, because they hit everybody. Everything that moves. So I mean, it must be tough for the referees to distinguish. The penalties will be a trip or a hook or something that interference, like it was last night on Blake, or the penalty on Hurdle. I mean, they're penalties. You're not going to let them go. But I would say it's going to be something with the goaltending. I'm anxious to see if there's any differential between the two goalies, because so far it's sort of been a toss-up. I haven't liked some of the goals, but I know there's traffic in front, and I just hope that the goalies can not go just play their game. And they've taken their teams this far, and I don't like to see a goaltender, either one, cost the team a game.
Hitch?
I think, first of all, Shanny, whichever team occupies the offensive zone more is going to win the series. I think Vegas has got to break down that one-on-one game that Carolina plays, and Carolina's got to get to the inside more often than not in the offensive zone. So I think whoever controls the O-zone from puck possession standpoint is going to have a big advantage. And I agree with Scotty. I think there's going to have to be a goalie that steals games here, or outplays the other guy. And that's going to be a big difference. And the last one for me is, this is really in a series of adjustments. And I think Vegas has made the adjustments needed to make them allow them to have more offensive zone time. And now I think it's on Carolina to make that change also. And it's going to make for great hockey, but I don't think there's much difference between either one of these teams right now. And I think the McNabb injury is going to be critical to look at, because that's a huge hole. When you have a player that plays that big of minutes and none of them on the power play, that's a guy you need every night. And that's going to be a big hole if he can't come back.
Gentlemen, this has been a treat. Thank you very much for this.
Nice to talk to you. Nice to talk to you again, Ken.
Yeah, you too, Scotty. Take care.
Yeah, keep going. Bye, John. Bye.
Bye, Scotty. Scotty Bowman and Ken Hitchcock, Stanley Cup champions, on this edition of 100% Hockey. Back after this.
NHL TV is now on DAZN. Hockey lives here.
Here we go.
Watch every game from every team. The best players in the world. And the coldest plays on ice. Watch up to 4 games at once for the ultimate NHL experience. Sign up now at DAZN.
So great to hear the voices of 2 of the legendary coaches in the National Hockey League. Both have contributed so much to the game, in Ken and Scotty. Both of them love to espouse the philosophy that they put to their players on the bench. And it's fascinating to see what they have done in trying to figure out how to coach against each other. So it was a real thrill to have both of those guys on the show. Darren, by the way, will be back on Monday as we prepare for Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final. It's one of those things where you watched Game 2 for sure, and the only way I could describe what we've seen in the first 2 games is epic. It's been fantastic. Neither team really takes any shifts off. If you do make a mistake, there's a good chance the puck will end up in your net. And then there are new heroes every time, whether it's Nick Ehlers, Seth Jarvis, Shane Gostisbehere for Carolina, or Brett Howden. It was amazing to think that after Howden scored his second goal of the game in Game 2, how many people were actually contemplating that, oh my goodness, this could be a sweep. Vegas could win the Stanley Cup in 4 games at home early next week. And Brett Howden would be the candidate, the number 1 candidate for the Conn Smythe Trophy. My, how the worm turns. Stankoven, Jankowski, Gostisbehere, Jarvis. 4 goal scorers in the third period and overtime for Carolina. And rather than having a 2-0 Vegas lead, it's a series tied at 1, and the Hurricanes have guaranteed themselves another home game. Game 3 in Vegas. 8:22 puck drop Eastern Time, 5:22 puck drop Pacific Time. It will be a great game. I think that's fair to say after what we've seen in the first 2 games. For Millard, for Bowman, for Hitchcock, John Shannon. Thanks for listening to this edition of 100% Hockey.